Travis, when you're ready, you may begin.
Resolved. The U.S. government should significantly curtail the use of domestic surveillance. That is the topic we are discussing today, as the affirmative team already brought up. The negative team will be prepared to argue curtail, the topics of the curtailment, domestic surveillance, and just the word domestic in general. Of the definitions we were ready to attack, curtail means to cut the budget for something. It can also mean to cut back or to end something before it is finished. Surveillance contextually means ordering, or domestic surveillance contextually means ordering private companies to turn over their data on citizens on the NSA. It could also mean the collection of data authorized by the issuance of a blanket warrant. Monitoring terrorists abroad is not. Skip that part. Don't want to read that. Domestic, it can mean relating to a particular country. It could mean originating in the United States, or it could also mean endemic or local. Since the affirmative team did not specify which form of any of these words we were talking about, we are prepared to talk about all. Okay. The affirmative team brought up that domestic surveillance is illegal and causing an economic collapse. Without domestic surveillance, the country will become a capitalist country, because without domestic surveillance, the private companies can go ahead and go into without regulated trade and transport and such, which would cause there'd be all the money just be staying in the private companies rather than surveilling and limiting the use of that. Without the surveillance, creating capitalism, that also leads to a possibility of a monopoly, which means that there will be complete control of the entire supply of goods or a service in a certain area or market. And I would like to say that all these definitions are coming from the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So they say by getting rid of the NSA and stopping domestic surveillance, we're having an economic collapse, but in the end we are actually just creating more of an economic collapse by getting rid of it rather than having it. Also, the NSA has helped reduce the crime rates to be the lowest they haven't been in 20 years. Last year, nearly 2/3 of, this was on April 29th, 2015, by the way. So last year, nearly 2/3 of the respondents to a Gallup poll said crime was on the rise, while in fact all evidence points to the opposite conclusion. Violent crime rates across the nation sank by more than half in the 1990s. They remain under 20 years. They remain near 20-year lows. With that, consider the enormous amount of resources that are devoted to crime prevention. Value lock surveillance equipment and invest in precaution. High crime rates may discourage private investment in local businesses, which has the effect of lowering both the quantity and quality of available employment in an urban area. So by getting rid of the surveillance, we will be allowing the crime rates to go back up, which will then affect what is happening now with the quality and the quantity of jobs within urban areas. And without the NSA, applying median estimates of the cost of each index crime in the literature of the number of index crimes reported in the United States in 2012 yields an estimate of the cost of index crimes that are approximately as high as $310 billion when unreported crimes are accounted for. This represents approximately 2% of the U.S. gross domestic product. One estimate suggests that the aggregate cost of crime to society exceeds $1 trillion. To put these numbers in perspective, $1 trillion is approximately the size of the U.S. healthcare sector. So by getting rid of the NSA, we are allowing ourselves to have to spend that money on the impacts of the crime itself. Also, the affirmative team brought up the need for privacy, but really the need for privacy is just an understatement, because we do need the privacy. One fact would be within the feminism side of it. So, according to Marnie Keenan from the Detroit News, this was posted on October 29, 2015. She says that the most dangerous place for a woman in this country is her own home. She's most likely to be beaten or killed by a man she knows. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, almost 20% of U.S. women have been raped at one point in their lives. That's 1 in 5 women raped. 3 U.S. women a day, on average, are killed in domestic homicides. On top of that, we have the support of the President on the idea of domestic surveillance. Even though he was not the President's put in, like say the Patriot Act, which allows them to do the surveillance. The Obama administration initially defended the surveillance program, saying it is legal, limited, and effective in preventing terrorist attacks. James Clapper said the program does not monitor phone calls, but acquires telephone and metadata to be acquired only when there is reasonable suspicion. Officials claim that mass surveillance tactics had thwarted 54 terrorist plots. Overall problem for the U.S. counterterrorism officials is not that they need the information from the bulk collection of the phone data, but they don't sufficiently understand or widely share the information they already possess that is derived from the conventional law enforcement. So it's not that they need your information, it's just for a little support. And they say that they want to go through and recreate new laws against the like the Patriot Act and stuff that's already going on. But what they don't understand is that stuff is already being done for it. And so the Senate appears, according to James Breslow from PBS, the Senate appears poised to pass a House bill, the USA Freedom Act, that would restore the lapsed Patriot Act powers in the law. The one critical difference in the new law is that the bulk phone records would stay in the hands of the phone companies rather than with the government. The way the government is intercepting communications, it cannot tell at the point of collection whether the actual sender or recipient is or is not a U.S. citizen. So when we use terrorism, we're doing that to find we're using it to find terrorists, but we can't tell the difference of whether U.S. citizens or not. So that's why we have to take everyone's phone call, because it is a computer, so it's not a man that can tell the difference between one thing and the other. And also they said that the government was using the cloud or so for surveillance, but you're not relying on the government to do that. You're putting that when you pay your phone bill each month and relying on your phone providers to trust you. But really, you're just giving your information out anyway, so in that return, you can't blame the government for your own decisions. And I'm now available for process.
Prep time, affirmative team. No.
All right. Is a capitalist system the only economic system that can successfully function?
No.
Why not?
Why can't a capitalist system be the only structure that can work? Because communism is another thing that has been shown to work in the previous past, along with other things.
So you're saying that America should?
No, it's not. I'm saying you asked a general question asking if whether another type of economy can survive, and I answered your question.
All right. You said getting rid of the NSA would create an economic collapse. How exactly would that happen?
Because without the domestic surveillance, that also pertains to large companies. So let's say, I don't know, like a company that's like the world's largest trade company. They don't have to have limits on how much they spend and who they buy out and such. So they could go through and buy out everybody else, and they could be a monopoly. And it's been shown in the past that monopolies don't necessarily create the strongest economy.
So our economy is relying on one company or a few companies?
That's not what I said.
But you said it could create an economic collapse.
Yeah, without domestic surveillance, there's no limits on like what companies can do, because how would we know what they're doing exactly if we can't look into what they're doing?
But that's privacy. Alright. How does the NSA and domestic surveillance prevent women from being harmed at home, as you said?
Okay, so obviously today technology is a huge thing. I guarantee I know my parents specifically, they can have arguments that still carry over into text or such. And if it's becoming something so brutal that we can actually see through phone calls or texts or emails, we can see the brutality in that. We can also go through and like, you can have police officers drive by the house, and if they hear or see anything suspicious, they can stop. If they have to get a warrant to go in there.
Isn't domestic surveillance, wasn't it made to prevent things from happening, not?
That is
find
preventing
out
things
crimes?
from happening because you're finding out what's going on by sending in local, because like I said, the information did not specify which type of domestic they're using, whether it's local or nationwide, so then we can go through and monitor phone calls and such, and then go through and locally handle the problem.
So the NSA isn't only looking for terrorist activity, they're also looking for domestic crimes too?
It's domestic surveillance. We can look for anything that's domestically, which could be nationwide, locally wide, which can include at-home violence, because like I said, you guys do not define which type of domestic you are going for, which domestic can pertain to terrorism or at-home abuse.
Who defines what reasons are good enough to go through phone records and metadata?
That's time. Affirmative team, would you like prep time? No? Okay.
You're holding that up, is that a go?
You can when everyone's ready.
Appreciate it.
Alright. So in our first class examination, we were asked what laws is surveillance break, and I have a source here that's, well, the negative team also said this, but did we say that?
Oh,
Anyways,
that's what you mean?
the NSA can use data unless there's a specific reason. I think that has been certified by the Attorney General. However, the NSA often collects this data without this because it can be, the Attorney General can apply it retroactively, which means that the NSA can always break laws regarding surveillance, and they can always collect data for without having a reason, as long as it can cover their backs afterwards. Also, the negative team quoted rates that the surveillance has stopped crime, but I have a source here that says Richards 2013. I think it was a Harvard Law Review article. But, he says that we must recognize that surveillance is harmful because it increases the risk of blackmail, coercion, and discrimination by menacing our intellectual privacy. And for privacy not being completely necessary, well, who would decide what is necessary for privacy? And the majority of people think that privacy, frown upon our domestic surveillance and our infringement of the U.S. our privacy. I have a source here that says a majority of Americans disapprove of the U.S. government's collection of telephone and internet data as part of anti-terrorism efforts. And our views from abroad in 43 countries. 62% of them oppose the U.S. monitoring of American citizens. Also, there are very few surfaces that check whether the NSA is having good reasons for monitoring us, because the NSA actually internally audits itself, which means that there are very few external sources that can check on the NSA to make sure they're following all the laws. The NSA has internal audit mechanisms and audit staff. The intelligence community receives regular briefings on investigations or analyses conducted by the NSA, but the NSA is the one reporting on itself. This is a type of circular reasoning where people were asking the NSA, are you following all the laws? And they say, yes, we are, believe us. Also, the NSA actually is having a significant harm on our economy. One, because on a low end, 21.5 to 35 billion in one industry is actually the cloud computing industry is actually a big deal, and it's not that it's that consumers are paying individual companies. It's still a matter of government surveillance being a harm, because without suspicion of the U.S., people are suspicious of us because we have surveillance over our citizens. and that directly harms our like trust and our reputableness to other countries. So that's why we're losing like 10 to 20% of the cloud computing market to foreign competitors. Also, surveillance is bad because like there's a giant power disparity between like the watched and the watchers. So and there are like this also increases harms like discrimination, coercion, and the threat of selective enforcement. So surveillance can still increase crime. And the NSA actually keeps its financial records confidential. Like it's like I don't know what they call it, but it's no one can see it. It's not public. But estimates like we have data on like the branches that the NSA occupies, so we can see how much the government as a whole spends on a defense branch. And estimates put the NSA spending at around like hundreds of millions of dollars a month. So that's a lot. That's a significant amount of money. Yeah, I'm open to cross-checks.
Negative, would you like some prep time?
No.
Who talks next? Is that okay?
Yeah. Seems good. Oh, Tommy?
Yep.
Okay. Can you produce any of the dates of your evidence?
Yes. What ones would you like?
Specifically the dates of the crime rates.
Alright, it is 2018.
Okay. Would you say domestic surveillance is based on religion or race, or would you, like, if I had to reword it, would you say that it's more commonly to be known that if you're based on your religion or ethnicity that you could be more apt to be surveilled or spied on?
Would I agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Alright, who decides our privacy?
Who decides our privacy?
Yes.
I would say each individual decides how much privacy they want.
Okay. Okay. Does the NSA keep phone records private?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If the NSA keeps our phone records private, then why are we having this discussion if it's not like a release to where everything's like on private? Because like I brought up in mind that we do put it in our trust of we do pay people to basically collect our phone records. So like why are we discussing the topic of privacy when you agree that the NSA keeps everything private?
Can you repeat that in a different way?
So you agree that the NSA keeps our phone records private?
Yes.
Okay, so why are we discussing the topic of privacy when you are agreeing with me that privacy is not an issue, considering we do put it in our hands, we do put our phone records in the trust of companies to track them.
You mean like it's like phone service providers like Verizon, like you
Yes,
trust them?
yes, so like Verizon, AT&T give our phone records to the NSA. Yeah, we pay them to do that.
Well, many Americans are willingly trusting Verizon or AT&T, but not by extension the NSA. Like we are willingly giving our records to our phone provider, but we are not giving consent to having the NSA take them.
Okay. Do you think that people know that the NSA has access to their phone records based on the service providers?
I think as of recently they do.
As of recently? Okay, and would you have an opinion on why they keep continuing to invest in them?
Invest in what?
Into the phone companies, like as in paying for their phone bills. Like if it was that big of a deal when they just like stopped communicating on phones or technology in general?
No, I think our technology is too ingrained in our society for us to find any alternatives like not using phones.
Okay, so like I said, why are we discussing the topic of privacy when everything's kept private according to your evidence?
Because it's not kept private to ourselves. Like we do not want the NSA
Okay, but
to
you
have
just said that.
Time. Negative, do you want any prep time?
Yes, no, these 2 months.